Profound, we're thinking it's time to chop down a deeply rooted myth of the family tree. This seemingly innocent concept, while comforting, often creates an incomplete and even exclusionary picture of what family truly is. We're about to deconstruct why it's a flawed model for understanding connection and belonging, and open your eyes to a much broader, more inclusive definition of family. Hi, Sherri. How are you?
I'm good, Trish. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm interested in seeing where this conversation goes today.
Me too. We're doing it cold. Let's do
Yeah.
it. Ready? Go.
Ready.
Okay. So, what are the myths of the family tree? How are we going to chop it down?
Well, I think one, and I have had personal experience with this being adopted, is, and with my daughter being adopted as well, having school assignments and such that highlight the exact lineage and the DNA lineage as being important and using that as a teaching tool. While I do agree that that is a good skill to have, I think it does not take into consideration all of the types of families and types of trees that we have these days with divorced and second families and third families and people who never were married and adoptions and foster children and all the different ways that you can make a family going exclusively by DNA for kids in classrooms, especially younger kids, may reveal things that they don't want other kids to know about. And the pressure to follow that line was always one of the very few things I can say growing up that was an issue for me. I hated the idea that I knew what they wanted. They wanted to see how the genetics worked down. So I knew they're like, well, just do your adoptive family tree. Yeah, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about how all of the line behind you have helped shape you. And that's not exactly true. And it just kind of others the person.
Well, and sometimes I know in those school experiments or those school family tree assignments, they're talking about, how do your Scandinavian roots show up in your features,
Right.
and that's not necessarily how adopted kids or fostered kids or blended families, how that works. So that's a good
Yeah.
point, Trish.
My daughter was given an assignment a few years ago where she was asked about doing this, and she came home and she said, Mom, I can do the work, but I don't want to talk to everybody in my class about, being an international adoptee and where I'm from. And, I don't want to get into all that.
Right.
And we've talked about this before, but long story short, I had an unknown conversation. I didn't know I was talking to the teacher about it, how this had bothered me as an adopted person as well, and that it was, kind of an issue for her, and how I would think in this day and age we would be beyond that. And I was so lucky that I did talk to the teacher, because she was like, I'd never thought of it that way. And they actually changed the assignment to pick someone to do their family tree. So it didn't even have to be you. And you can still learn the exact same thing by following it. So she picked an auntie's family tree and was very comfortable with that. She learned the lessons of how a family tree works, learned the lessons, all the things that they wanted her to learn without opening up her private life to everybody at school, which I thought was pretty cool. And for some people, they may think, oh, that's overkill, or it's too much. I don't think it is, especially when you get into, there are a lot of kids in foster care and things like that may not even have access to their family trees. And so they can put one back, then they have to explain to why they don't have any more. It's just a big thing. And I think we can be a lot more sensitive about it. And I know, Sherri, that you and I, when we were searching, using the online tools like through Ancestry, 23andMe, GEDmatch, etc., had separate trees, one for our adopted family and one for our biological family, because it was too difficult to try to have the two trees as one. It was just next to impossible and super confusing.
Mm-hmm.
You think?
Well, and on my Ancestry, I also have the drop down because my husband took an Ancestry kit that has his family tree and my biological family tree and my adopted family's family tree. Like, you just keep going, which makes me question why we think of trees. Why was it a family tree? Why was it so linear? Why was it, not a spider web? Or why was it what are some of the, constellations, or what are some of the other ways that we could do this assignment?
Well, I think one of the things I would really like to see added more to, especially the online things, it would be nice if they had more variety in the way you could name people and the way you could classify people as you're going in. For example, whether it's a stepmother's family, sometimes that is just as much family as your birth family because they're the people you grew up with and feel attached to and such. And I think by adding those type of things into the ability to do your trees would make it a lot easier. And then you could go off on that branch. Again, using the tree analogy,
Right.
have another branch that goes off of that then you could connect all these trees together a lot more easily.
Mhm. Wouldn't it be interesting on that tree, web, constellation, whatever it is, if you could add found family? Because I know your daughter calls me Aunt Sherry, and we're no biological relationship. But when you combine the families for that child and that project, and even for us adults looking for our biological family, to be able to include those influences is just as, or maybe even more important than a great, 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 great grandparent that came over from wherever.
Well, and I think for anybody who hasn't listened to our podcast or read the book yet, knowing that you and I have been friends since we were two, it's literally, you're not like a friend, Auntie. You literally are like family and always have been. And for your kids and mine, it was always going to see. I mean, I don't think they really knew until they were older that we weren't actually. I know Mara didn't know that we were
Right,
actually not family,
right.
but we might as well be. We our kids have grown up together and played together and had holidays together and birthdays and all that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
you're just as much part of my family, more so than some of my actual family.
Right.
And I agree with that. And I think a lot for, especially like when you have families that don't get married or things like that, and you have connections, it would be nice to be able to add the brother and sister you grew up with that may not technically have DNA related to you, aren't adopted. How do you put that into your tree? But you need to,
Right.
that type of thing. I see where you're going.
Well, also, just a thought, the ancestry tree lets you pick pink and blue. And in 2025, that might not represent everybody as well. Maybe it's
True.
time for them to update their ideas there a little bit. Um, you've got emotional health and social bonds that in these school projects, I don't think teachers set out to purposefully, make a kid uncomfortable.
I don't
I'm a
either.
teacher. I've been a teacher for 32 years, and I worked in elementary school for 21 years, which is probably the age where they would be doing this family tree project. But I think for any teachers out there listening, or for anybody who knows a teacher and they do this project, maybe challenging them to come up with some different ways and some different inclusions, knowing that generally they want everybody to feel comfortable and included.
Have more
Maybe,
options.
yeah, maybe even some options of, when in a lifetime did the adoption take place, or when, did fostering become, and can you delete sections that are personal, and can you add sections that aren't maybe the typical norm in a family tree project?
Agreed. Agreed. I think that would be wonderful for them to have options. And again, inclusion is important. Um, and I think privacy is important as well.
Mhm.
Not everybody wants to share their story. I worked at United Way for a while, and there are a lot of kids that are in places where it's not possible for them to be able to do that, and maybe not even safe for them to do that.
Mhm.
And not everybody's going to be in that situation, and it's certainly the minority. But I think it would be a really good thing to add, just like when you're going to the doctor's office and there is no box at all for unknown,
And
adopted, something
mhm.
like that, to where you're not having
Medical
to
history.
constantly
Right.
explain. We're right over.
Right. It occurs to me that even in our own personal stories of finding our biological families. When I first found my biological mother and I emailed her and I was being, very vague, trying to make sure I approached her in a safe way. I didn't just say, I think you're my biological mother. I said, I found you as an ancestry match and I think we're related. Can you help me with this family name? And her response was, my father left home when I was 5. I really don't know that much about my paternal side. So even people who aren't adopted, I mean, I think it's probably a lot of people that this affects.
Well, absolutely. And especially you start moving then over into thinking about all the DNA connections and the people that have had surprises
Right.
and who have found out that their tree is not what they thought it was. And
Hmm.
how do we divide that out? Well, that now you're running back into the same problem that we had with, being adopted or having this DNA tree or that DNA tree. Being able to branch that out into more of a spider web would really be
Yeah.
interesting. And I think that's going to happen more and more and more because, as you and I have both said, if you find a second cousin who's put their DNA in, it's just not that difficult
Hmm.
in a lot of cases to go ahead and track down anybody in that family.
Hmm.
And if 2 or more people in that family have done it, or on one on each side, it gets easier and easier and easier to do that. And there's so much information online.
Hmm.
Whether you want it to be or not, obituaries and yearbooks and all kinds of things like that, paper articles. I mean, we've used articles about somebody going into the military and being able to get their parents' names off of that,
Hmm.
wedding
Hmm.
announcements, things like that.
The
That,
census. Yes.
yeah, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have some kind of digital footprint at some point.
Hmm.
Um, Now, that may not be true super way back, but I think
Hmm.
now it would be almost impossible for somebody not to have at least something somewhere, some connection that would be easy to track down.
Well, and especially now, I don't know how long these, order them, get an ancestry kit or a 23andMe or whatever the other kits are. Originally they were a little pricey. And now, you can pick one up for $39 if it's Black Friday or Christmas present time or Mother's Day or Father's Day. I think another interesting point about the family tree project or thinking about deconstructing the family tree myth would be the fact that we've depended on oral history in families for so long. And
True.
then the reality of, oh, well, I did a DNA test and now this has come back. Just like Trish has a biological grandmother who's Native American. And that's crazy when you look at Trish with her fair self. Um, and then in my adopted dad's family, everybody knew that there was a grandmother who was a Native American, but when he actually did the kit, it didn't show up. Now, originally, I thought that meant that he didn't. No, there's no way he had a Native American grandmother. But now that we've had these kits, we did it 8 years ago, and you'll log on or you'll get an email and it'll be like, we had a big update. I'm like, wait, how can you update your DNA? But in reality, what's happening is more people, more samples are getting done. And so they have a bigger representation of each ethnic background. And, more people are added in, more details are added in. And then you get these updates and you're like, wait, I'm not as Irish as I thought I was, or I'm
Well,
more German than I.
and more historical documents are
Mhm.
uploaded all the time, more photos,
Yep.
things like Find a Grave are updated constantly.
Right.
So there's just
Right.
more and more information, I think, as the years go by.
And I know we've talked about like Chinese adoptions, about how maybe not as many people in China have done them or in some other place. That's just my uneducated guess. I don't know actual facts on that. So maybe somebody who's been adopted from abroad doing a test might come up differently than like you or I.
Well, and there have been a lot of stories, just looking on the internet through the media, things like that, of people who have been international adoptees and found out their sister is 7 states away, and they had no idea. And uh,
Right.
people who have like your husband, have found other children that they had no idea existed after his dad left, and things like that. That it really breaks
Right.
down those um, secrets and
And the
those.
and the myth of the family tree. It
Yeah,
breaks it down. How are you going to add that person in? How does my sister add me in when I was 48 when I found these people? So she was 42, or oh, I can't math. I don't know, 38, something like that. Anyway, so like how do you add that in? I don't know. It's not a tree. Where did they come up with the idea of a family tree? Just the branches?
I suppose so. Well, I think it did used to be a lot more linear, and just because of the nature of how things were at different times. But going back through a lot of history and documents and things, it is interesting to see how some things were listed incorrectly just by necessity. Like you had mentioned, my Native American grandmother. Well, all of the paperwork said she was white.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that just can't be. Well, when I did actually talk to my family, they said, yes, well, your grandfather basically told the census people off and to leave him the hell alone, and put her down as white so they wouldn't bother him anymore, and don't come back. And
Mhm.
I was like, is that how that happened? And yes, and she had all the photos and everything to prove it. But I think a lot with the branching of the tree down, there is a lot of history there. There's a lot of precedent there, and a lot of people do fit that model.
Mhm.
But now, with things being as different as they are, and our understanding of um, people just aren't that different. I mean, we've found stories of where dad had one family, and after the kids were 4 or 5 years old, took off, and they never heard from him again. Well,
Right.
I can't remember who it was, but said the dude set up franchises and would go and do the same thing in
Right.
another state. And it's like,
Yep.
how do you put that? Just putting them as half brothers and sisters doesn't seem, technically it's true, but being able to have that story to go with it, I think is
Right.
really important. And one of the things that I think I've enjoyed most about looking through the ancestry and find a grave and things like that has been seeing the pictures and the stories and things that people have put in
Mhm. Right.
about that oral tradition you're talking about, that maybe makes the paperwork and what's actually there, oh, that makes more sense, or oh, that's how that happened, or like, how did my Catholic family all of a sudden become Mormon?
Right.
Oh, well, somebody's husband died, they remarried,
Mhm.
and now the whole family became Mormon.
Right. Or
Oh,
vice versa.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that makes sense now. But if it's 5 generations back, you may not have known that, but maybe great Aunt Lena figured it out and told you about it, and then by putting all that information out for other people to share,
Mhm.
has really,
Right.
for me, added to a lot of richness and interest, and made things seem more even human than just the name on the paper. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, I do. I do know what you mean.
Have you found a lot of stories like that online?
I have, a lot of them even come across in social media. We hear a lot of historical facts about either history and families that these things happened, or, they discover a different tribe of people and this is how their family systems worked. Um, and I think even as a human race, we're evolving into how family systems work by being more inclusive and empathetic to different situations. You know, so finding practical tips for acknowledging and celebrating diverse family structures is something we need in our school systems, but also things that we need in our communities. Um, and just redefining or considering what family really means. Sometimes family is society, sometimes family is your neighborhood, maybe not so much anymore, but at times my neighborhood has been like family. the original neighbors would always keep candy on Halloween for the kids and love to see them come by dressed up. And the older ladies would bake and make ornaments for the kids when they were little. And those are still important things that we pull out, for our holiday decorations and hang on the tree. And that's something that family would do. So traditionally family, are they the actual grandmothers? No, but they're still the structure of who's supporting us. So that's how I think I would define family. How do you think you
Well,
would define family, Trish?
one of the things that makes me think of is, looking back, one of the things that we have noticed is every generation has a different culture,
Mm-hmm.
has a different set of standards, morals, way things are done. Now,
Mm-hmm.
people have been people since forever. We just have indoor plumbing now, but we still all do the same stuff.
Right.
People still cheat. People still, whatever.
Yep. Same needs, same
Same thing.
feelings.
Yeah,
Yes.
same thing. But having the ability to share those stories now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we put a little bit more, not complete, but a little bit more emphasis on adding those stories to our online trees and information and things like that, so that when 100 years from now, 200 years from now, whatever people are looking, that they have a better understanding. For example, if you have a poly couple or a poly triple, and that's your family setup, or you have
Mm-hmm.
three sister wives or whatever it is, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to explain the culture and how that was accepted or not accepted, and how the families blended together or didn't blend together, or where everybody kind of came from, but they were all still considered the same family.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to,
Because a lot of those situations that you just named, it feels so taboo to ask questions, when you meet somebody who's polyamorous or in a throuple or in a family like sister wives, so there you're watching it on TV and you're thinking, wow, that'd be great to have a sister wife to share the responsibilities with, but you're also thinking, well, but what else do I have to share, right?
yeah, not for everybody.
Not for everybody, but it is for somebody,
It is.
and
And I don't know how people have handled that traditionally. That's really beyond
mhm,
my experience of that. But I would think it would be something that, like what you were talking about, would make me think, well, having some of those designations, and even if we don't have the designations now,
mhm,
maybe by putting the explanations online, it would make more sense later, and putting the culture of, why this happened, or,
right,
how things happened, or when we joined the family, putting the year, maybe that the stepkids were adopted by the stepfather, or things like that.
mhm,
Having a little bit more detail to flesh it out with might, be a really good
mhm.
thing.
Well, now that we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, okay, if you are you a Mormon family with multiple wives? What does that family tree project look like? Or I know of somebody where there were two couples and they became just all involved with each other and nobody ever looked into whose baby belonged to who. What would those children's family tree project look like?
It's a lot to think about, and
It
it's an
is a lot
interesting,
to think about.
especially as some people never really are able to track back too far, and then I have some people that have tracked back, to the 1200s,
Right.
1100s, which amazes me that there's that kind of information available through family lines. But hearing some of the stories that were passed down, and I have one friend who's really done a lot of her husband's Scottish heritage, and there's so much information going back, but still seeing how they have gone all over the world and still have
Mhm.
this society connected through their DNA and the
Mhm.
name and the experiences, and then going back all that far as to where it started, was never a thing for me before. But it really is amazing. And to um, find all the records that has all their household goods listed,
Mhm.
or this was their second marriage, when they were widowed, what happened to, this, that, or the other. It to me, it adds such a layer of understanding and completeness that I think just the traditional family tree really kind of misses. And I think it's a wonderful thing to have. And the nice thing about having the online stuff is you can share with other people,
Mhm.
and you can find their trees and pictures and things like that and connect up. And I don't know if there's a lot of people that aren't on those sites that know that that is part of it as well. As if you do find
Mhm.
somebody who, your great Aunt Jocelyn, well, there may be pictures from that whole side that you would never have known about, and you see how, the looks and the features of the family and such have gone down through time, and then be able to connect that to your tree.
Right.
It's really fascinating.
Well, we found in my family tree, we found the great grandmother who had come over from Scotland. In my family, the boys in my household have always just been enthralled with their Scottish heritage. And every year we go to the Scottish Highland Games, and we're part of Clan Gordon. And this year, one of my sons was asked to carry the family flag, and
Oh,
it's pretty cool how that comes into play once you do know, some of that.
one thing that really did surprise me, and this isn't so much family tree, but it did surprise me how much pride I took in knowing, oh, we're mostly English. Oh, we have
Hmm.
this. I have, these are the bloodlines, Native American, et cetera. And being able to place yourself from somewhere was a something I never even really thought about, but it's a weird addition that I just never thought was a big deal, but all of a sudden it became a very big deal. It's like I'm really feel connected. And I've
Yeah.
always kind of had a particular, anybody who knows me, I've had a very strong pull to England all my life. And it was like, oh, I wonder if that's genetic. I mean, I don't
Yes.
know if that's connected or not,
Hmm.
but it was very surprising to find out that, oh, maybe there's a reason.
Hmm.
And having all that kind of stuff was very interesting.
One of the things that I found, this is the opposite of what you just said. I thought that when I found my biological family, when I found the heritage, when I found the pictures online, that I would feel immediately connected to people.
Ah,
But again, we've spoken about this as well. Not having the history is the struggle, you know, and my maternal side has made it they've opened their homes, opened their arms, opened their lives, and included me, but not so much on the paternal side, but I look at those ancestry pictures of the great and I'm like, I don't feel any connection, you know even though I wanted to. Now what you said about, German, Irish, Scottish, that was super cool. I love that part.
and I felt strangely connected when I saw those pictures from 2, 3 generations back.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, wow. I see where I get this from. I see where I get that from. I see where, and it was fascinating.
Mhm.
Just as much as seeing the people in person was.
Really?
Yeah, it really was. I felt
Okay.
a real connection to, for example, the pictures of my Native American grandmother where she's holding the baby and has my grandfather beside her. It was like, wow, that's my family too, that far back.
You
And
felt a connection.
yeah, it was interesting. It's like, oh, I see this feature as a little bit, and I see that feature as a little bit, and having those far back connections really gave me a better feel for that jump down the family line than I ever
Mhm.
had just having an adoptive family. Now, I will say, I don't want anybody to get the idea that being adopted for me has been bad or difficult or anything like that. But these are issues that, a lot of adopted and or, DNA surprise people may have. But for me, it was a really connecting thing to know this is the name of this. These are the people. These are the history. This is where they came from. These are where they moved to the US. This is where other ones have moved to, Ireland or Scotland, or seeing all those kind of things. It really made me feel like, oh, those people are my roots too. And it's very
Mhm.
interesting. And as we always say, everybody has their own experience.
Yes,
It's
and it's not
fascinating.
always what you think it's going to
No.
be.
And it's funny that I would think this would have been your experience and yours
Yes.
would have been mine, but it ended up
Yep.
being exactly the opposite.
Yep. Even though we knew each other so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things too that I think was very eye-opening for me was, while I had my own views of family trees and having to do it at school, and having to have the two trees, and figuring all that out, was then it brought up the subject for, well, my daughter is adopted, and of course she's in my family tree. And then I thought, well, I bet that's how my parents felt, and my grandparents, that of course I'm in their family tree, and feeling that duality. But I feel like I have tried to give her the opportunity to hold both things comfortably, where yes, you are definitely in our family tree. You could not be any more part of our family. But on the other hand, I want you to be completely comfortable if you decide to find your birth parents,
Mhm.
that you can have that complete tree too. And no, I'm not a part of that tree, as far as the DNA goes, but not to feel a pull between either one, that you have to pick one, or that one's more important than the other, or something like that. I think we really, as parents of kids who may be in these types of situations, to deal with them honestly and openly, and give them the space to be able to be comfortable and accepting of having these different type things, and not feel guilty that, well, my adoptive parents might be mad that I'm worried about my
Mhm.
birth parents.
Mhm.
Well, I think one of the things you and I have definitely seen through all the people we've spoken to and our research and things like that, is that there's a lot of adoptee parents who aren't comfortable, and haven't been comfortable with that, and have made adoptive people feel like they almost have to choose.
Yeah.
And I was very blessed that my adoptive mother was very supportive of me searching, and you were very lucky with that too, that you had support searching.
Yeah. My whole life, they encouraged me to search,
I
and
had,
that was a gift.
yeah, I know people who didn't have that.
Yes, me
And
too.
there were times that my mom was like, well, I don't know why anybody would search. And then there'd
Mhm.
be other times she'd be like, well, of course you're going to look, you would want to look when you want to know where you come from. And I'm like, well,
Mhm.
even they feel that push, pull, push, pull.
Yes.
But I think, like I said, making it expressly okay. Don't assume that your adoptee knows it's okay. Being open about it and talking about it,
Right.
um, I think is really important. Would you agree?
I would totally agree, and I think that goes to all situations with children or with your children, is having the conversations. My parents were born in the 1930s, and it was not part of their character, not part of their generation, to be able to just openly discuss um, any number of things. And I'm so thankful that now mental health and openness and talking is the thing, because in like these situations with us, it made all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I can understand the feeling of adoptees not wanting to hurt their adopted parents. I get where that comes from.
I do too.
Yeah. Yeah. But it
Yeah,
was a gift. And I
absolutely.
think all of these stories, it's interesting to think, like you talk about your daughter's biological mother. Where is she? How is she? What was she going through? We've thought about our mothers, our biological mothers, and how it was for them. And so if we're considering all the sides, we have to consider these children, whether it's foster care or adoption or blended families or whatever, you know, what
Well, and one of the things I think was really interesting was I had some older family members that when I told them I had searched and found, they're like, well, we still love you. I hope so. I'm not replacing you. I'm not.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah. But I think that just goes to show that it was just again, what we're talking about, going back to that was that time.
Yep.
That was, no, I'm not trying to replace anybody. I'm not trying to usurp anybody. You're still my family. I'm still your family just as much as I was. But I have this component that y'all don't.
Right.
And I'd really like to know what it is, because you've known it your whole life.
Right.
And I've never had that opportunity.
Right. And at different times in our lives, it becomes important. It did. Yeah, there were times when it wasn't important, but there were definite times when it was important. And so redefining the family tree and taking into all the considerations for all the different situations is huge. I wonder if the people listening would come into the comments maybe and give us their thoughts on deconstructing the family tree myth. And if it's not a tree, what else could it be? And how to incorporate this in projects and in talking with our younger people coming up now who are in these different situations.
Yes, absolutely. And what do they think should be included, and possibly how?
Yeah, the how is the part that gets me. I like the idea of spider webs, but I'm dark and twisty, so I like spider webs anyway. But I like the fact that maybe the kid is the center of the spider web, and then there's those thicker veins, but then in between it's woven, so like maybe the thicker veins are the biological family and the adopted family. And what if one of those couples or families, is divorced, and then you add in a new step parent, or somebody passes away and now you have a new parent? Like, I find it fascinating. I'm really interested to see if somebody can develop that further.
Absolutely. I am too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, this was fun, Trish.
Absolutely.
This
Thanks.
was fun. Yeah. I like this idea of sitting here and just sharing ideas, and can't wait to see if somebody interacts with this. Yeah. So this is Found with Trish and Sherri, the podcast. And Trish and I have been having these conversations for decades, and we're so excited to invite you into them. Find us on YouTube and all the socials. And if you have something, an experience or a story that you'd like to share with us, reach out to us at foundwithtrishandsherri@gmail.com. Maybe you could be on a future episode. So Trish, is that good for the night?
Good for the night.
Okay. Thank you for joining.